There is, of course, no introduction that I could make that would possibly be as powerful or as perfect as the film that they produced. But while they're getting mic'd up, I'd love to give you a little bit of their background. Edward Watts is an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker who's directed over 20 documentaries and narratives telling the true stories of courage, heroism, and humor from across the world, ranging from war crimes in the Congo to the colorful lives of Rio de Janeiro residents. His 2015 film, Escape from ISIS, exposed the brutal treatment of the estimated 4 million women living under Islamic State rule and told the extraordinary story of an underground network trying to save them. It received numerous international awards and citations, including an International Emmy and Best Current Affairs Documentary nomination from the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. Among his other work, his first narrative short film told the incredible true story of a 7-year-old Afghan boy's fight to survive as he is smuggled into the UK. Edward aspires to tell visceral, gripping stories about people in far-flung corners of the world to emphasize our common humanity and reduce hatred. Waad al-Kataeb is the director, producer, and cinematographer of For Salma. She was a student at the University of Aleppo when protests against the Assad regime swept the country in 2011 and became a citizen journalist determined to document the horrors of the war. Waad filmed the human suffering around her as Assad forces battled rebels for control of Aleppo. In 2016, she began a series of devastating films inside Aleppo for a UK news program that received almost 500 million views online and won 24 awards, including the 2016 International Emmy for breaking news coverage. She stayed through the devastating siege, reporting the terrible loss of life and producing some of the most memorable images of the 6-year conflict. When she and her family were evacuated from Aleppo in December 2016, she escaped with all her footage. Waad lives in London with her husband Hamza and 2 daughters. Eric Stover is faculty director of the Human Rights Center and an adjunct professor of law and public health here at the University of California. He launched the first forensic investigations of the disappeared in Central and South America. He has been an expert on mission to the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and conducted a survey of mass graves throughout Rwanda for the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. He has provided evidence related to several high-level accused and helped secure legal and social accountability for international crimes perpetrated during those conflicts as well as in others. In the early 1990s, he conducted the first research into the social and medical consequences of landmines in Cambodia and other post-war countries. That research helped launch the international campaign to ban landmines, which went on to receive the Nobel Prize. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you both for being here. First of all, I have to say, I think Sam was going to be a pain. I think the work she was doing on the bus. It's so wonderful to have you here. I'm going to ask one question, and then I do have one question at the end, but we really want to open it up to you. And my first question is really how, first of all, you got the reels, or the film, let's say, out of Aleppo, and then were able to take it to Ed here to make the film. How did you both come together to work together?
So thank you very much for being here and for all of you to be here tonight. To get this material out had 2 big challenges. The first thing, just to make this material protected in no way for doing this, was just like being lucky enough that this material wasn't destroyed or wasn't attacked in any place where we were. I was trying all the time cover it with all the towel that I have for putting under the bed things where anything happened would be protected. But then when we were forced to flee and there was no option just to go through the border and this 3 checkpoints by the Russian Assad regime and then the Iranians. So I don't know what to do at that time, and I just felt that the only way to make that survive is to keep it with me. And if anything rather than that happened, I can't really protect this material. So I had 12 hard drives, 2 of them from desktop, and the other 10 just normal extra hard drives. I put them all in one bag, and I wear it as in the opposite way of how we wear the backpack. And at that time, I was pregnant with my second daughter, Tayma. She was 3 months. And I wear my big jacket all over this. And it was December, so very cold. So it was like good to have big jacket over this. It's not very clear. And then I have summer over all this. So I was like just feeling that this is the only way like to keep this. It's between me and summer. And then we were really lucky enough that when we were on that checkpoint, it was 4 a.m. in the morning, snowing a lot. So as you've seen, so it was like just lucky that they weren't really checking everything. They looked at the card in very quick way, and they count us that 1 man, 1 woman, and 1 child. And they said like, oh, the other 2 checkpoints which we didn't see. We've seen them, but they didn't stop us. They just want everyone just to get out as soon as possible. And this was the first like happy moment where I felt like we are out now, and the archive also all I have. But then like 2 weeks later, when we want to go to Turkey, and we had permission to cross the border, but I was so scared that I don't know if the Turkish government will understand like what this material and will they really let me like take this material out? And if they didn't, I don't have like good language in Turkey to like and speak with these people. So I felt like could be a risk, and if we were okay of sending out, I don't want to lose them in this point. So I've sent every 3 drives with one of my friends. So I took 3, and the other 3 friends took everyone 3. And then I collect them again in Turkey. And the easier way was when I came to London the first time in 2017 in February. This was like just easy, no one asked me about what I have in my bag. So then when I came to London and I met Ed and we started the conversation more different.
So Waad had gathered over 500 hours of material through the 5 years, so it's the most incredible archive, all on these, as she says, 12 hard drives that have been through war as she had. It was like this precious, fragile record, basically. And when she did me the honour of like talking to me and started showing me the material that she had, I think from that first hour when we sat together and she started showing me stuff, I realised it was the like most extraordinary archive of documentary film that I think had ever existed. Like what she managed to capture. I've made films in conflict zones before, but what she managed to capture was something I've never managed to do, and I don't think anyone else has in the way that she did, was capture the full breadth of the human experience in these kind of situations. You know, the horror and the suffering, yes, which is so important, but also the way in the darkest times human beings do rise and begin to show the best of themselves, and they show each other compassion and love, and they tell jokes even when the bombs are raining down. And I think that was what is so extraordinary about what she achieved, and why this film, I think, is an important thing for us, as many people as possible to see.
Thank you. Well, let's open it up for questions. So we'll have 2 mics, and just pull up your hand.
Thank you for sharing this film with us. I was hoping you could speak to the role that women played in the revolution in Lebanon, and how that evolved over the years.
And like any place around the world, the women are in the part of this community. It was different places between like different neighborhoods and different traditional like people has. So for example, in the university, there was, from the early days, there was so clear that the woman is very big part of the protests. And the regime at the beginning was a little bit careful about how to deal with women in front of the community, because they knew that people could be more angry with them if they like beat this woman or arrested them. They were doing some part of this, but all they were trying to keep that not public things. So in most of the demonstrations from the early days, we were like the people, the woman, we were trying to, if there's any like army or the security forces who were trying to arrest some guys from the university, we were trying just to gather all to us next to these people and try to release them. And that works in many, many places, and it didn't work in many other places. So with the time when the revolution turned to the military way, when you've seen all the violence became much, much bigger, you've seen this more of this movement that were stand one step back, because it became more about the gun and the power things. But just slightly short term, when people start to be take one step forward. So you've seen teachers or nurses, or even in some places they were the journalists or the activists who are in the area. And in different places, what you can see normally, it's not that big role as much as the men has, because that community in one part, and because of the hard situation in another part. But also because of that, again, you have lack of responsibility in that community. So you have a lot of women who lost their husband, or the people who they were relying on before, and maybe they never went out for education or for work. But in that situation, they became more responsible of everything. And you can see a lot of women working, and it's not just because of the need, but also the new open for the new community that happened when you have a lot of different people living in that area, and from different background and from different places. It seems became more this is the new community that is set up after the revolution.
Anyone else? Please.
Thank you very much. Are you concerned that the targeting of hospitals will be used by authoritarian regimes similar to Putin's in warfare in the future? And what kind of accountability measures do you hope to see come forth from the international community?
I think what we're trying to do off the back of the film is build an advocacy campaign, an impact campaign specifically around the point of stop bombing hospitals, because what we've seen, there was targeting medical facilities that happened in Sri Lanka, but nothing has happened in the same systematic, deliberate fashion as the Russians and the regime have done. And the fact they've been able to do it on this scale with impunity, I think threatens us all, actually, and that's what we feel, because that is the norm of war, and it is a specific war crime. It doesn't matter, even if there are enemy combatants being treated in the hospital, which in a large number of cases isn't happening, but even if it was, to target a medical facility is still a war crime. And that's one of the big things that we're trying to use this incredible reaction that we've had from the film to try and affect some kind of change. And on the flip side, the second part of your question is, it's incredible how limited the power available to the international community is. So one of the ways in which the UN is constructed, because of the respect given to member states, they can't actually say directly the Russians and the Syrian regime are the ones responsible for hitting these medical facilities, even though they're the only ones who are flying aircraft. And I don't know whether you guys saw, there was a New York Times piece 2-3 weeks ago where they forensically dissected a single day when 4 hospitals were targeted. And it can only be the Russians. They had the radio transcripts, they had the identification of the Russian aircraft in the air, and they showed how the specific weapons that were used were bunker busting precision weapons, which only the Russians have in that area. And yet still, the UN and in these forums, they can't say it directly. And so what's going on?
And not just even this, but also the UN and some of the WHO and some of these organizations, they not just can't do something, but also they are doing a lot of things in their own way. In 2016, when we were inside Aleppo, these 8 hospitals have been completely destroyed. All of them shared their location with the UN, because the UN asked them to do this, to give it to the Russia, to promise them that they will not bomb these hospitals. And Hamza the only one who's refused to do this, because the hospital wasn't in any map before, it wasn't even hospitals before, so they don't know that. And he took that his decision and his responsibility, and he could have been did the wrong things if things wasn't happened that way. But even now, 3 years later after what happened, they are doing the same things again in hospitals in Idlib. And there's many organizations who's document all these attacks, and one of them Physicians for Human Rights. So it's just it's this didn't work 3 years ago, so why you didn't, you just now repeat this again, and you know that this is something that will not work. And we did one screening in the UN, and we were like speaking about this specifically. And it seems like all the system is not just like useless, but also it's wrong. And we need to start like think about new way of, I don't know if like this system could be active anymore, or just like new things more and more.
This is the thing, there's this, they call it the deconfliction mechanism, and as Waad's saying, the UN puts pressure on these medical facilities to give up their coordinates. The idea being that, we'll give your coordinates to the Russians, so if they bomb you, we can say, well, you knew what you were doing. And that's exactly what's happened. They've used it as a shopping list of targets. All these deconflicted medical facilities have been hit. But what's failed to happen is the second part of that equation. They've been hit, and now the UN's like, we don't know how to hold them accountable. And so there's this thing happening called a board of inquiry, which has just started, which is like an internal UN process. And this is something that all of you in the room can actually do, because this UN board of inquiry is happening to find out what happened to these hospitals that should have been deconflicted, but they don't have to make the findings public. And it's even ambiguous, like to what extent they can point the finger. Well, all of you in this room could tweet the Secretary General and say, hey, we would really like to know what the findings of this inquiry are. And I think if there was an awareness in these institutions that people were aware of what was happening and cared about what was happening, then maybe we could build some kind of pressure to actually see some kind of accountability happening.
Thank you for this extraordinary film and testimony to your incredible strength and love that you gave birth to 2 children and to this film. The question I have for you is, your friends who left with you, the evacuees who are now all over the world, how do you see the future for them, for Syrians as exiles? Because obviously the connection to Aleppo was so strong, you didn't want to leave it. How do you live now, with and without it?
The main thing is that it's my future, and my daughter's future, and then my community future, and that's my country future. It's all related to each other in all the details with what's happening. The first fact that I think all of us need to believe as Syrians and people outside, if the situation kept, if the same things of what's happening, no one can ever be back. And if there's no any way of accountability or justice, this is can't be a country for all of us to be back and start to build our country in the way that we want, or even if the way that we don't want, if the regime kept ruling Syria. So the first thing really about, we need to see a real change on the ground to make people feel that this is safe for us to be back. There's a really we can't be back when all the people who did this crime for the people still controlling and dealing with the country as their own farm. And it's there's over 11,000 there's thousands of people, from 100,000 of people who are still in Assad prisons until today. And there's now 6 million refugees around the world who are Syrians. All of these people need just to find a real change on the ground, and this is absolutely will be by Assad regime to be out, to start thinking about if we can really see future for us in our country. And it's not just in our country, but also in all the other countries around the world. Unfortunately, what I've seen now here, during this time, when we look at the new people who will be elected for the next president here in the USA, when they start the conversation about, we want to restore the relationship with Assad regime and with the Syrian government. And they said but there's no alternative for this, blah, blah, blah. But it's not just about us, it's about you guys, about the other side of this world. If your president will put his hands with very dirty hands of our president, how you can see your future too. it's all really connected to each other, and it's all about all of us in this world to be really free, that we can keep dreaming of at least like better future for us and for our children.
Thank you so much for presenting and making that film, going through everything you did to bring it to us. It seems when we're looking for accountability, I was wondering about how we can achieve that starting closer to home with our own government and perhaps the war crimes that we've participated in the Middle East. And how can, that seems, we're the taxpayers, we're the voters, we have much more power in dealing with that than we do with, say, the Russians. I'm worried about pointing the finger someplace else and not seeing our own responsibility. Do you see anything like that having a role in this?
It's a really great question. I think one of the things that I would say is that my country as well, Britain, we've done terrible things. Abu Ghraib, one of my first ever docs was about Abu Ghraib, for example. But I think we have to beware of making parity, right? In the sense of the crimes of the Russians and the Assad regime are on a completely different scale. Now, that's not to diminish the crimes that Western nations, this is my personal opinion, and no doubt many of you would disagree. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, do everything we can, the United States should be a signatory, for example, to the International Criminal Court, which I believe it's not. That would be a really great thing to do. But I think it gets into a very dangerous space when we start saying, oh, well, we don't want to point the fingers at the Russians or the regime because, we're so bad as well. What America has done, what Britain has done, is not the same as bombarding civilian areas with chemical weapons. 100 attacks, sarin attacks, chlorine gas attacks. They have not systematically targeted civilian areas with the kind of offensive bombardment that the Russian Air Force has done. 72,000 airstrikes by their own statistics in the first year of their intervention in Syria. A lot of those targeted, indiscriminately against civilian areas. The specific targeting of hospitals. America has hit, to my knowledge, one hospital has been deliberately targeted by American forces in Kunduz in Afghanistan, which is a crime and should be prosecuted. There have been 50 medical facilities targeted since April in Idlib, and that's by the Russian forces, and that's not including ambulances and medical workers. And I think this is one of the things that they use against our resolve to hold them to account and to put pressure on them. It's the same thing people have tried to create parity between the rebels and the regime in order to bamboozle people into thinking, well, everyone in Syria is as bad as each other. Whereas if you look at the statistics, the regime is responsible for over 90% of the civilian deaths that have happened, with ISIS responsible for 5% and the rebels responsible for another 3 or 4. And I think this is, we have to have the strength to say, these guys are committing atrocities on a scale that is unmatched since the Second World War, in my view. And we need, while being well aware of our own failings and doing everything we can to clean them up, that we shouldn't clean our own house before taking them on. That's my perspective.
Yeah, I think just it doesn't matter if we will point on these people, not point on the other people too. It can be all of them together, and it's not about the priority of this, but the urgent thing is recalling that this is need to be stopped. This is the first thing before doing anything. And then the accountability could be for everyone, every country, every person, and every group who did crimes, for everyone. It's not we can forgive some people and look at the others. It's all need to be accountable at the end.
And just to say one additional thing, one of the most interesting questions, and this is going to be maybe provocative given we're in San Francisco, but I would say one of the worst actions that America has done in the whole course of the Syrian civil war is failing to act, is Barack Obama failing to stand by his red line when chemical weapons were used and being convinced by Putin that he was going to somehow sort this out. Because that was the crucial moment, that moment in the middle of September 2013, was the moment where the regime realised we were not going to do anything to stop them. You know, and sometimes it's horrific, but you have to be willing to stand up and fight, because if you don't, it's appeasement. And one day people are going to look back on this, I'm going to say my Spanish in the war thing. One day people will say Syria was like the Spanish Civil War, you know? We failed to stand up against fascistic powers in Spain in 1936 to 39, and that created, that emboldened tyrants and created the Second World War. And I think one day people will see a similar dynamic as at work here, and we've emboldened tyrants everywhere, even in our own countries, and we're going to have to fight them in order to bring the world back to a better place. That's not Frontline's point of view, actually. Not endorsed by PBS.
Hi, thank you also so much for making this film. With 500 hours of footage, what was the process like for you to relive a lot of these events, and then how did you two work together to really find this story through all of that?
So the first step was to watch everything, which was disaster, and especially with my bad organization things. So I had 12 hard drives, a lot of footage, it's just like through these hard drives. I've tried to copy some of them, and like part of it was copied, but of them is not. There's no like folder's name, so new folder into new folder into new folder, disaster. So the first thing was I need to organize this. So I've tried to start, okay, I will organize everything and then we can watch, and then it's not working. So we start watching with all this mess. And the first step was to cut this 500 to 300 hours. It was like 1 week or 10 days of sitting together, watching everything, and it was so clear that there is a big, like basic things which will not be in. You want to speak about this?
Yeah, I mean, like one of the amazing things about Waad, she's like one of the most gifted, like naturally gifted filmmakers I've ever met, and she's a true documentarian. You know, she documented everything, including like herself peeling aubergines for like 3 hours. And also, there was like this whole rehearsal process for an Amdram performance in Aleppo in 2014, which was documented in exceptional detail. And because she lived through it and she was right, every minute was very important. So after we've been watching like 40 minutes of her peeling aubergines, I was like, I think I got this one. She went, no, just hold on. So we kept going and going. And so, yeah, that was the initial step. But it was like sculpting. And I think the amazing thing about our collaboration was being an insider and an outsider. And
the main, like the first step was really to start with that. We did long interview with myself. So it interviewed me. We start speaking about the whole thing since I was since I was born to the point when I was in London. So we tried to use all this, like we were both of us looking for what the real moment when we felt that this is really important for the story. And with all this interview, which we didn't use any of, like 1 minute of that interview, as you were saying, but it was very good guide to know like how the situation like changed and what things really affected me personally and affected the city itself. And that was like a very good part when we start like with the basic line which we wanna speak about during the process. And that doesn't mean like we didn't change a lot of things. So during the whole process we wrote the script thousands of times. We've like changed it with our 2 editors, like really, maybe we didn't left any one way of trying to do the story and we didn't do it. So it was a really long process and hard and personally I enjoyed it really so much. I hope you.
It's been a long evening, and let me follow up with just 2 questions. First is, so everyone in the hospital, where do you see each other, or you communicate with each other? How are they?
So unfortunately, some of these people, or most of them, we can't meet because they are live now in Idlib, the area which is still under attack now. The hospital itself is still working, and many of this stuff is like they start a new building in Idlib, and it's named Quds Hospital again. So we just like communicating with him. Hamza is now in London, but he's still like have kind of consultant with the management of the hospital, and he's trying like to build himself a little bit, like quietly. But the other family who we've seen in the film, the Salim, Afra, and their 3 kids, they live now in Turkey, and we have good communication like literally every day. We have some people who are overseas, and during like France, we've met some people in all the tour around the film, going a lot of places around the world. We've met many Syrians, and it can describe like how many Syrians all over the world. So it's like just everyone trying to adapt to the new life, trying to do something in his own specialization and his own like career, and same time like in the new country that he lives in.
Well, the last question then would be, once everyone leaves here, what should they take with them? What should they do?
So the first thing, we launched our impact campaign 2 weeks ago. It's called Action for Sama. So please everyone like go online, see the website. We still have just like the first step of what we want to do. So we've just did like smaller steps now, but we are updating that every 2 weeks. We've just like tried to give people very specific and simple things to do. And we really need the help from all of you to spread the word about the film and tell people to go and watch it. And it will be on Frontline 19th of November. So please, like, you can tell everyone, you know, your neighbors, your friends, and your families.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we hope is that we feel this is a film for this year. You know, like the world is on fire, and everywhere, from whether it's Chile to my country to Haiti to Iraq, you know, to Pakistan, to like everywhere, like the world is going through a dark patch. And this film, I think, is an important thing for us to engage with. And these guys are an amazing story because they show us that we are better than we think we are, you know, and that we have these qualities of courage and humanity that can stand against all of this crap that's coming in the world, and we can stay, and we should stay in the fight and keep going. You know, it's not over for Syria, it's not over for America, it's not over for Britain. Like, we have got to start finding our strength and our belief in ourselves again, and that is why we want this film to reach as many people as possible, and for them to understand it's about Syria and it's about Aleppo, and that's so important, but it's also about all of us as well, and just, to take what inspiration you can from that.
I have one last question.
Okay.
Sorry, but
Hang on.
I do.
Hang on.
I don't know how to even frame this easily. You mentioned the International World Court. It seems to me these issues, given that it's going on throughout the world, that would be a place that might be relevant in terms of bringing your case as an example to the World Court, and that might be useful in, I don't know what, but being helpful somehow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the problem we've got, and you guys probably know better than me, but the system is so constructed that, well, you know better than me, please.
Look, the way it works now with the International Criminal Court, is that too soft? Okay.
The way it works with the International Criminal Court, there are 3 ways in which a case can get before the court to the prosecutor. The first is by the Security Council, which will refer a case, as they did with Sudan and Uganda. And of course, the Russians blocked and others blocked it being referred to the court. The second way, if you have signed on to the court as a state party, then you can you refer the court, of course, a case to the court. Of course, Syria never joined the court, so that's not possible. The third, and this is one we're all looking to see, is that the prosecutor herself, Fatou Bensouda, could actually open an preliminary investigation and then see if it develops into a full case. And but I will say, at least in Europe today, there are a number of national war crimes units that have been established because of so many migrants who come from the Middle East and elsewhere. And when they find some refugee who says, you know, that was a torturer or that alleges somebody, they can be arrested. So we are seeing cases in Germany and in Sweden and in France, but they are still limited.
And
So
individual.
yes, they're just individuals.
Okay.
Well, with that, I really would like to, could we all stand again and really give